Chair, many thanks. Good evening to you. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. I'm sure you've all got better things to do, but I'm delighted that you're here, and I hope you've enjoyed the very eloquent and very thoughtful contributions from my colleagues. Because they said so much about the proposed structures and the facts of the challenge in front of us, I'll probably try and take a slightly more earthy tack on where we are. And I'll start by reiterating one or two facts. The Probation Service has the best figures in terms of prevention of reoffending rates since 2007. It's an organisation of gold standard status, as people have said, that's invested in the skills of its staff in a way that is unsurpassed anywhere, not only in Europe, but perhaps the world as well. You'll find very few probation services of a similar ilk to the England and Wales service that isn't modelled on what has been achieved. That's evidenced in the articles written in the Probation Journal, for those that read that, and if you haven't, get on the subscribers list, it's online very soon, and it will be relaunched to form the new Probation Journal. So that shows the respect that what our members do is held in terms of the world and in Europe. So we know all those things in terms of its success. It's got a vital task of rehabilitating offenders. You see, that's the central difference between the likes of Grayling and his cohorts. He talks about punishment. Every sentence must have a punitive element. Well, that just really shows how mistaken the man is. Just how safer communities are was evidence in the excellent TV documentary, which I hope most of you saw. Indeed, many of our colleagues here in Surrey Sussex Probation starred in it. Well done to you. And Napo sends its regards and appreciation for the sterling work you did. That was the most important piece of work that put probation on the map, so well done to all of you. So what does a properly managed and publicly accountable probation service mean to you? Well, clearly it means safer communities. It means doing something different than the traditional approach from the mainstream political parties that talk about getting tough on crime and all the rest of it. Because prison in itself doesn't work. Don't they just get it yet? It doesn't work in the short term. Yes, people need protection from serious violent offenders and repeat offenders who commit serious crimes. But read any account in terms of what it actually does to help people get their lives together, and it's minimal compared to the vicious cycle of reoffending that also many go back to. So that's our agenda, as Maureen and others have espoused. And our agenda is in marked contrast to that of the privateers who face us at the moment. People who seek to make profit, not only from other people's misery, but also from the victims of crime as well. Let's not forget that. They'll be queuing up as well to offer services to victims of crime that we currently do, because it will be cheaper. And you can only wonder what sort of service that will amount to. And it's worth just focusing a little on the evidence of the worst excesses of these privateers. Because Caroline's right, it's not just G4S and Serco we should be wary of. GeoAmy, you've seen their vans whizzing around between prisons and the like. Can't produce prisoners on remand to the courts. Can't produce cell cover for people awaiting trial. Capita, we know all about them. Can't find the translators to pitch up to court to help the people who are accused of offences. And that, of course, prolongs the misery of victims and witnesses. And I won't go away without talking about our friend G4S, oh what a mess, at Oakwood Prison, and Serco at Thameside Prison, now rated among the 3 worst establishments anywhere in England and Wales. What a record to be proud of, eh? This is who would take our work, our jobs, and put communities at risk. G4S and Serco, we say, oh no, allegedly overcharging electronic tagging. And if I were an offender, how would I feel about being put in a G4S remand centre after the recent tragic and quite horrendous death of Jimmy Mabenga on his way to deportation? I read today that one of the people involved in this incident had 67 racist jokes on his mobile phone. Speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the sort of values that these people have. So it adds up to this, colleagues, to the companies who will plunder our probation service. Not yours, Grayling, ours, the taxpayer. The taxpayer who funded it, nurtured it, developed it, put it at world standard. Your friends in the private sector are unfit for purpose and should be banned. And the track record as we know it in probation already in London, which has been alluded to already by Paul. It will be okay, they said, in the bid process. We think we'll make a pretty good fist of honouring terms and conditions. Your members have really got not a lot to worry about. We're used to dealing with trade unions. Why our managers are trained to operate in the trade union environment. Stupid day +1. Sorry, we need to lose 1/3 of the workforce. It's there for all. It's plain to see. It's a con trick. This government are perpetrating the biggest con trick of its kind in this type of environment. So they are unfit to be let loose any longer in the justice system. And I'll say this to Grayling and Jeremy Wright, who I tackled on this issue the other day. Jeremy, why are G4S and Serco, who are under SFO investigation, still being allowed to play for contracts, still being allowed to make money from the back of the taxpayer? And I said to him this: if it were one of my probation members who's been accused of fraud, they'd be suspended without any compunction whatsoever. But not this lot, and not under this Justice Secretary. Privateers who are unfit even to tag the dead, it seems, and not get away with it. And, allegedly, rip off the taxpayer by way of their electronic monitoring contracts. Contracts that cost £106 million a year just for those two companies alone. Now, Paul Senior and I may disagree about the root cause of all of this. It didn't take Grayling long to find the usual scapegoat in the MOJ, did it? You know, the MOJ knew about this. Well, if they knew about it, why didn't you know about it, Minister? You're in charge of the organisation. So we'll beg to differ, Paul, but it's malfeasance one way or another, and it will all come out, we hope. Though don't be too confident, because Chris Grayling has just turned down a request we put in for freedom of information on the infamous risk register that underpins this great privatisation experiment in probation. Not surprisingly, it's not in the public interest to know that there are 15 elements of this that are disastrous to the public. But don't worry about it. He's just an elected politician after all. So going back to the point, think how much some of that money and the £800 million a year enjoyed by contractors in the justice system alone, £800 million a year, could be spent on proper restructuring programmes that the probation service could run with partners, yes, with the third sector, yes, if needs be, with the private sector if they're fit for purpose on that, under our commission, under our management, to make sure the taxpayer wasn't being ripped off. Think what you could do for the short-term prison community that we can't do now because we don't get that opportunity. And Napo and Unison do have one thing in common with the Minister. I'm ashamed to say it, but it is true. We want to engage with the under 12-month custodial community because we know exactly what the risk factor is from that group. We know it, yet it wants to cast the expertise to the winds, split you off into CRCs and a National Probation Service, and create an almost political apartheid system. So we know what's needed. So it's just another of the great lies perpetrated by this miserable, inept and incompetent group who call themselves a coalition government. One that's also unfit in the eyes of many for purpose. And while I'm on a roll, let's ask Nick Clegg, shall we, what he's got to say about all this. Why Nick Clegg? Because he's the minister that signed this off, transforming rehabilitation. He signed it off. It's quite apparent to me, who is not a practitioner, that I know a damn sight more about probation than he does, yet he has now pronounced the death of the probation service. He too just repeats Grayling's letters in all his replies. And I say to him and all his Lib Dem coalition colleagues, wake up and smell the coffee. You bunch of turncoats. You should be ashamed of yourself, given your social roots in that once great party of yours, that you can sell off an institution like probation without so much as batting an eyelid. What a disgrace. So Grayling's so-called rehabilitation revolution will not produce his trumpeted journey of desistance, because it will lack the necessary skilled mentors to do what we all want. The people who could help him do what he wants to cast away to the winds. He tells us it's a great idea to meet prisoners at the gate. Well, let me tell you something, Christopher Grayling. Our predecessors, with far more vision and foresight than you'll ever muster in your life, thought of that idea 106 years ago. It's called Big Society. And while all these politicians leap on the bandwagon talking about big society and what a great idea it was those same people, those same forebears of ours that thought about that long before politicians thought it was hip. And if they are serious about social engagement and opening up diversity in provision, then let my members bid for their work on a level playing field. But he doesn't want to do that. He trumpets mutualisation. Now, I belong to a mutual organisation called the Benetton Healthcare Society, probably one of the best examples of its kind, but it's not without its problems. It still needs to balance the balance sheet, it still needs to employ staff. But it does so on the basis that it's not for profit. It's there to help the people it serves, its subscribing members, and open up services and assist the NHS. We're not seeing that type of model in Grayling's plans. It's just a vehicle to allow his mates in the private sector to get on board with some respectable title known as mutualisation. And to all those of our members, anyone else involved in the process, if that's your best bet at the end of the day, then clearly we wish you well. But I will endorse what others have said. Don't get carried away. The lifeboat won't be big enough for all of you. And the idea of this is to pitch you at each other's throats in a competitive process. That's the reality of this model. So here we are then, facing a journey of desistance and more bureaucracy. People sentenced to a few days in prison will be subject to a 12-month licence. And where will they go when they come out of prison? Will these mentors be able to redirect them to suitable housing and employment, or a third bedroom somewhere up the road in their mate's house? I mean, it's staggering, isn't it? Will they have the knowledge and the skills, and no doubt have the goodwill and desire and commitment to help? They won't have what you have. They won't have the knowledge of intervention programs that are proven to work. Because it's more likely that those poor people who are being put into this situation will find themselves back to the revolving door of recidivism down the track, at a cost to the taxpayer somewhere between 30 to 50k per annum per prison place. It's a scandal. And it will be the public sector that will pick up the pieces, as you heard. More victims being created, and communities end up paying a very high price indeed. Not just in financial terms, but as you well know, in the risk of serious further harm offences. So they are some of the fundamental reasons why, as Maureen has said, Napo and Unison have been working together to develop our campaign. And I'm proud to have our brothers and sisters from Unison by my side, as I am all of those who want to support us. And it's not too late to try and thwart Grayling's plans. That defeat in the House of Lords was one of the proudest moments in my career. We set that ambush quite some time before. Even the arrogance of ministers couldn't see the press statements in the Telegraph and the Times that morning pretty well saying, "You're in for a kick in here, guys." They ignored it. The whips didn't do anything, and 61 people crossed the benches in the House of Lords. Quite unparalleled, I might say. So that's an example of us using our brains where we didn't have the power of the big battalions, and there would need to be more of that. But we're up against people who think they can ignore parliamentary democracy. People who, as I've said, won't publish the risk register, and we won't give up on that. And we'll be making that a fulcrum of the House of Commons debate when the offender rehab bill comes back in October. Grayling says, in 5 years' time, you'll all thank me for doing this. Well, by then he hopes to be Prime Minister if he didn't but know it, because watch what will happen over the next year or two, especially if Cameron loses the next election. Whatever achievements he thinks they are, they'll simply be this: another grandiose example of the destruction of an effective, respected public institution on the grounds of ideology, and that's a fact. So, what do we want you to do about it? Well, some of you are already doing something about it by way of being involved in the Napo and Unison campaigns. We want you and the organisations you represent to join our struggle tonight if you're not on board. I feel like a window salesman. It's a suit. Caroline Lucas is a convert to the cause. Thank you, Caroline, for your tremendous support. We do value that. We now want to target the 40 key marginal seats up and down England, Wales, and Scotland indeed, to put pressure on people to understand what is going on. Because it's not a done deal, and the next election's not a done deal, and this government that portrays itself as governing in the interests of all is shambolic and weak, as well as knowing nothing. And they are vulnerable. And those 40 marginal seats, as they always are at any election, are especially key next time around. So Napo and Unison will be helping our branch activists to organise those types of visits. And we want you to get along to them. And if it's not in your areas, get your friends and your cousins and your families to go along. Because we've got some very powerful allies. We've both had, as Maureen has said, recent indicative ballot results, which were respectable given this time of year and given the fact that when you ask people an indicative question as opposed to a real question, the results are not always the same, but we were pleased with the feedback. Clearly, for tactical purposes, I can't release those figures. I told the Minister that, who had the temerity to ask me, and I won't, because I think we need to analyse those.
Was it more than the PCC vote?
Absolutely more than the PCC vote, and moreover, a damn sight more than most of the politicians that rule over us get. That'll give you a clue. But I have another message, whilst we build that campaign, as people have mentioned about the Labour Party. Now, Sadiq Khan 9 weeks ago wasn't saying a great deal about the probation service, but we in Unison have been crashing away at him and his colleagues, and now he's all for us, except for one thing, which is giving a commitment in advance of the election that if Labour win power, they will rip up any contracts in the probation service that have been awarded. That's gumption, that's bravery, that's opposition in action. So I say get on with it. So we'll be planning our visits to the TUC, the major party conferences, and planning for industrial action. We need you, colleagues, to join our coalition of the willing. It's a coalition that includes Napo, Unison, PCS, the refounded Justice Forum, the Justice Union's Parliamentary Group, the Justice Alliance had a fantastic rally against legal aid cuts in London, where I was privileged to be asked to speak outside the Old Bailey 2 weeks ago without being arrested, I hasten to add. PCS, the Law Consortium, the Criminal Bar Association, Prison Officers Association, who Napo are joining forces with to speak at the party conferences, the Police Federation, no they can't strike. Tanya Bassett, our new parliamentary press campaigns official, and I went to see them yesterday. And they've got big issues around employment, pensions and the future. And they're very sympathetic to this assault, this systemic assault on the criminal justice system. The Howard League, the Prison Reform Trust, the Haldane Society, FDA and others. It's a growing voice of opposition. And meetings like this, fantastic turnout, and meetings like this up and down the country will be needed in the coming weeks and months. Because it needs one message to come from events like this. Probation is not for sale. The justice system is not for profit. Thank you very much.